Hello. Every day, the shit show that is unfolding around us seems to be getting worse, and I think we need to create a new way of talking to each other, a new communication medium to help us navigate that and help us survive it. And today's video is about what I imagine it might look like. Okay, the reason the Christians were able to take over the Roman Empire is that there was an absolutely horrific plague, and if you got sick, the Christians were among the only people that would help you. And because of that, these informal networks of trust were created, which grew and grew, and when the time came, all it took was a push in the right direction, and everything changed. You know, a groundswell of popular opinion, and then something breaks and everything changes. So I think the new thing needs to be a bit like that. In the last 25 years or so, I've been through about 11 therapists. I leave them burnt out husks at the side of the freeway. And the last therapist said he couldn't help me, and what I actually needed to do was join Narcotics Anonymous. So I looked at various Narcotics Anonymous groups around the place, and the one that interested me the most was in Auckland, which is about 700 miles from here, so I didn't wind up going to it or any other, in fact. And the reason that interested me is because they weren't particularly hung up about people quitting their self-medications at all. They were all about being a support network. They were all about giving people a chance to be listened to and a chance to be heard, and knowing that there are people who would have their back if they were in trouble, and so on and so on. And I think that is a really good idea, because most addiction comes from disconnection of some sort up here, usually things that happened to you when you were young. And a really good way of dealing with internal connection is making strong external connections. You know, that's kind of a diamond bullet for any addiction, no matter what it is. So I think that is a really, really good idea. And I don't actually have a problem with drugs. Which is not to say I've not had an enormous amount of fun with drugs over the years, but as you get older, you learn to replace your self-medications with things which are a bit more sustainable. So what I have now is an absolutely chronic internet addiction. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here now. I woke up at about 7, and I have spent the entire time sitting in front of a laptop, doom scrolling and playing chess and doing bugger all. I have got a chronic internet addiction, and I know I'm not the only one. I think the majority of people who have got cell phones have got something along those lines, possibly not as bad as me, but, you know. So I think there is an enormous need from about 10 different directions all at the same time to create informal networks of trust. So I think it's face-to-face meetups, and I don't actually think it matters too much what the meetings are actually about. It could be about being addicted to the internet. It could be about what to do with local dogs terrorising the playground or whatever. You know, just it needs to be sort of repeated and regular. And I think it probably needs. There's two components that I think it probably needs. And there are probably more, but there's two that I can think of. And one of them is that everybody needs to be heard. Everybody needs to be listened to and acknowledged without comment or judgment from anyone else. Because when you listen to somebody, when you acknowledge them without judgment or comment, what you're giving them is the freedom to change their minds. If you go in fighting, you're going to get a fight back. And I think that's really important. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, we need a way of resolving conflicts in such a way that it doesn't automatically escalate into a fight, which is what the internet has been. Well, it wasn't set up for that, but it's what the billionaire-owned social media companies have turned it into. So I think we need a way of negotiating disagreements such that we are putting our energy into things we agree on and not putting all of our energy and resources into fighting. There's a guy called David Snowden in Wales in the UK who has done a lot of work in this, and the way he does it is when it's a disagreement, you break it down into smaller pieces, and some of those pieces you'll agree on and some of them you'll disagree on, but you focus on the ones you agree on and work from there. So I think it needs those two components. So what I'm kind of imagining is something which looks like a cross between citizens' assemblies, which is a way of doing democracy without having power affecting the outcomes. So it's basically democracy by jury rather than referendums, which gives the car keys to who's got the loudest propaganda machine, or representative democracy, which is just too prone to being corrupted, as we're seeing right now. So I think it's a cross between citizens' assemblies and Internet Addicts Anonymous, or alcoholics, or whatever the addiction anonymous is. And out of that comes a name, possibly. Citizens Anonymous. That's the best I can do so far. But I quite like Citizens Anonymous because it's a name check for citizens' assemblies, and it is fundamentally about citizens. That is the basic unit of this. It's citizens. It's not politicians or local business people or whatever. It is citizens. It's the basic, building block. So that's citizens part I quite like. The anonymous part I quite like for two reasons. One of them is that it tips a hat to Internet Addicts Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, and that the first thing that happens is everybody sits in a circle and is heard, is listened to. Everybody gets to say what their context is, where they're from, what their family was like, what's gone well today, what's gone badly today, and so on. And that kind of sets a context for the whole thing, which is a lot more likely to produce positive outcomes than if everybody goes in with an agenda. So there's that. And I also like the anonymous part because I think anonymity is a fundamental component of freedom. It is not the business of the government or corporations to be building up huge databases of everything that we talk to each other about. It is none of their fucking business. So I think the anonymous part is quite important because we need to be able to talk knowing that we're not being eavesdropped on, and you just cannot do that through digital devices anymore. If it is digitized, it is compromised. So there you go. That's what I think it possibly might look like. This is not a new idea, I don't think. The giving context before the meeting starts is something that Indigenous people here in New Zealand and in the Americas have been doing forever. Citizens' assemblies is ancient Greek. We've been doing most of this stuff for a long time, but we've kind of forgotten how to do it, and the energy costs of it are a little bit high. So, it's just far easier to sit in front of Facebook or whatever and get wound up by idiots who, if you met them in real life, and if they got to tell their context and you got to know a bit more about them, might not come across as being such idiots. One or two peculiar ideas, perhaps, but, if you listen to them, you give them the freedom to change their minds. So there you go. That's what I'm hopefully going to be banging on about for most of this year. It's kind of my project for this year. And I think there are other people working on it. I'm getting this feeling that there's this sort of groundswell. You know, every day I come across people who are doing and talking about similar sorts of things. For example, Roger Hallam, the Extinction Rebellion guy who just got out of prison, is trying to organise something similar, and David Snowden in Wales has been working on this sort of thing for decades. You know, I mean, it's well underway. I'm not the only one. But I would like to help drive it. So there you go. Thank you for listening.